Hello parents, and welcome to Get Right with Miss Wright. We are so happy that you are tuning into our new talk show, Get Right with Miss Wright. Today's episode is all about growing as a reading family, and we have two beautiful people in my presence. We have Miss Tammy Cornelson, our reading instructional coach at our campus Bradley, and we have our beautiful parent, Dulce. She is a proud mama of how many children? One. Oh, just one. It's just one. Yes, just one. And he is working on two. Okay. And what grade is he in? Third grade. Ooh, awesome. Third grade. Yeah, that's big. Well, we're gonna go ahead and get started. The purpose of our show, as we talked about before, is just to get a lot of information from reading. I'm going to let you know, parents, we're going to try to answer as many questions as we can. Some of the questions that we have, if we didn't have the answer to, please be sure to email us so we can direct it to the right person and make sure that we get those answers. So we're going to go ahead and kick it off. One of the questions that I want to ask first is, Tammy, just kind of tell us like your philosophy of reading, because reading is just so broad and so big. So, tell us just, how you feel about reading, the importance of reading, just to let us know on the parent side how we can help.
Okay. Well, reading is my passion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a reading specialist. I'm a literacy coach. And so growing readers is kind of my thing. So I get really excited when I see students growing in that area. Reading is super important because it helps students across all content areas. So, if they are successful in reading, they can be more successful in even math. Math has become so reading-based, science, social studies, all of the areas that they work in, being a stronger reader supports that as well. So reading is super important for that. And I think that building a partnership between the school and the families at home is crucial. The more support students get in reading instruction or reading support, we do the instruction at school, but then families can support that in different ways at home. It's just a win-win for our kids.
I think that's important how you say that, just to try to find like that balance, because I think sometimes we run into, and feel free to say to interject as, I know as adults outside of school, you're busy, you're working, you're cooking, you're doing, your motherly and fatherly duties, but just to not forget that connection and that bridge with the teachers as well as your family as a household being on the same page as far as valuing even reading. How do you value reading like in your home?
We don't. No, I'm kidding.
So when he was younger, what we did is I got a dinosaur coloring book, colored it, cut it up, and put sight words on it. It didn't work. We tried chalk outside. We tried games, and my husband and I just didn't have. It sounds horrible. We didn't have the patience, or Roman didn't have the patience with us because he's mildly autistic and he's dyslexic, and so language, reading, and writing has always been difficult for him. So when we would try to work with him, because we knew we had to, it didn't work out for either of us. He would shut down, or we would lose our patience, and so my husband and I thought that the best thing for us was to hire someone to do that. But I know people, there's some people that can't afford to do the hiring, to hire someone, or so that was our solution. But yes, reading is very important. We value it very, very much.
So that's awesome thank you for sharing that you do have a son that struggles, and so would you say that, even though you do have a tutor, it's still important that you continue to practice him?
Yes, so we've always read to him. The problem was him reading to us. He didn't want to read to, he didn't want to read to us.
Sure.
But we would read to him, or we would make him read to us, and we try to get books that he really enjoyed in order to kind of push him into doing it. But we struggle very much, and if it's bedtime and he just is he doesn't want to read, we're not going to push him, because we know what's going to happen. So we avoid upsetting him or him shutting down, because it's not good for anybody.
Right. And I think reading, as we go into, Tammy's going to give us a lot of information. Reading is just so complex. Like, it is so big. And so we're going to have Tammy kind of break some things down in order for us to understand and be better educated on, how we can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, the things that you tried with your son, mm-hmm. those are really great things. Mm-hmm. They work for a lot of students. For some, they don't. And, your child has some very specific needs. And, I can see where hiring someone maybe was the best thing for you and your family. For other children, they don't need that. It's very much of a personal decision, but there are a lot of things that you can try at home. Depending on your student and their needs, some things will work, some things will not. Mm-hmm. But there are lots of things that you can try at home. And one of the biggest things you can is just to give your student time to read. Yes. While you're fixing dinner or working on other tasks in the home, reading, having your child read to you, sit down and read. Maybe, depending on how long they can go. Some students can read for longer periods of time than others. But, if they'll read to you for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, 20 minutes, any amount of time spent reading is beneficial for them.
And I think what's important to remember, and I know that as we've chatted before, is that when we're talking about time and our episode being growing as a reading family, is finding that essential time. And I know some parents are like, I don't have time. Like, I've got to cook, I've got to clean, I have to do laundry, I have to go run errands, or I'm driving. But if your child's in the car or, in the living room, it's just the little things that you can do to make that a solid 10 minutes, like you said, or a solid 15 minutes, having them take the time in order to practice reading. And so I agree with you, Tammy. I think that that's really, really important for them to see that I do want you to read, like we are going to read, and we can work this out, while you're doing, multiple tasks.
Right. Yeah? And not only do I want to hear you read to me, but you can read to your students as well. Even your older kids, if you have third graders, fourth graders, they still enjoy being read to. Mm-hmm. And hearing you read to them is going to grow them as well, because you're modeling for them what reading should sound like. They're still in the process of learning. So hearing other people read is beneficial for them as well. So listening to your child read, reading to your child, equally important.
Time. Hear that, parents. Time. All right, tell us more.
Also giving them access to books. And maybe you're in a home where there aren't a lot of books in your home.
Happens.
That a lot of our families don't have a lot of books in the home. That's okay.
And they can be expensive.
And they can be expensive. Yeah. The book orders come home, the book fairs come, and they're great opportunities. But if you can't afford it, that's a reality for many, many families. Mm-hmm. But what we do have in our community is a fantastic local library.
Yes, we do.
And so, if you can make it a part of your, weekend routine every few weekends to go and buy books.
And I think that that's something free too, right? Because sometimes, going out on the weekends and you're with your kid and you're figuring out what can we do. I wonder if we can make weekend, trips to the library, and that's that valuable time. And also, most libraries, if not all of them, especially like around, like if you're, in the Spring area, Conroe area, Woodlands area, Montgomery County has certain activities that happen through the weekend, like just with reading. But there you find every single, which we'll get into later, different genres, different types of books, and it's free. Right. And I love the fact that, like, on how they don't limit you. And of course, like, you're going to bring the book back, but I think access, letting them see a variety of different books and allowing them to choose to show, it not only shows you as a parent that you care about reading, but it also helps build, that excitement. Like, I'm going to go get a new book, and keep them interested.
Yes. And I know my kids, when they were little, something they loved was having their own library card, because the library the library will let kids have cards, and it's linked to your account. But they think that's they're big. They've got their own library card, and so and the library will let you check out quite a lot of books at one time. It's not just 2 or 3 like the school libraries do, because they have so many more. They allow multiple book checkouts, so you can check out enough books for a few weeks. Right. And I think their checkout period is 3 weeks. So if you could just once a month or once every 3 weeks make a trip to the library on the weekend, or the library does have some evening hours. check out books, let them find what they like.
When we talk about books that, our kids like, Dulce, tell us a little bit about maybe a certain type of book that your son likes.
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs,
I
yes.
learned so much, by the way. That's another thing. You can learn a lot when your child, especially with nonfiction books, they come home with, a football book, and you're like, oh, I don't know about football. But then, they read to you, or you read to them, and it's like, oh, wow, I didn't know football started whenever.
Yeah.
And like me with dinosaurs, I still can't pronounce a lot of the dinosaurs, but I try. And, just obviously dinosaurs is something you learn at school, but when you get older, you forget about it. I mean, it's not something that you study, so I've learned a lot. And obviously, Roman has learned tons.
But I think that's also huge for you as a parent to understand not only, where he struggles, but he's having access to the books that he wants and he enjoys. Yes. Therefore, I'm more motivated to practice more, Mom. Like, okay, I'm going to do this because it's something. But a little bit. Just getting there just a little bit.
He likes going to the library. He likes picking his books.
But you know what? I wonder if, I know that, in school, Tammy, you can attest, of course, there are going to be those, mandatory books or suggested, highly recommended that your teacher, his teacher, are going to say that he has to read. But nevertheless, when he's at home with Mom and Dad, okay, we got to practice reading, but at least it's something that he's interested in versus like, oh, come on, Mom. It's like, pulling teeth.
Yeah. Or you can bargain and say, you'll read this book with me for, 7 minutes. Then you can read this book that might be a graphic novel or a comic book. And graphic novels and comic books they're books too. And kids can learn something from them. We just want kids to have a variety.
Right.
Those readers that only want to read graphic novels, encouraging them to find other kinds of books to read. And that takes us into our next topic, which is genre.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's a kind of a funny word.
I know. I used to say Genry or something like that.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah. That was so wrong. Sorry. That is so bad. That's okay if you said it.
That's right.
Yeah, tell us about
English. Kids know that word.
Yeah.
They can tell you what genre is. Ask them, what genre is this book? Most can tell you. And it's just the kind of book that they're reading. And there are lots of different genres of books. There's fiction, and within fiction, there's realistic fiction, books that,
fantasy.
There's fantasy, stories that could never happen. Realistic fiction
Three Little Pigs
could happen.
I'm sorry, I was like, that's just like my go-to thing.
Folk tales and fairy tales, which are great, especially for our youngest readers, because those are familiar stories. And so if you get those folk tales or fairy tales, then they can read them because they know them. Maybe they can't read every word on the page as a 5 or a 6 or a 7-year-old, but they know the story and they can read the pictures. And that's important too. It's important in building that identity as a reader to help them know you're reading. You might not know all the words, but you're still a reader.
And I'm so glad that you say that before we get into the comprehension piece. When we're talking about just reading, it's so much bigger. Like, I know sometimes we feel like if our little ones are just opening the book, they're not reading it, they're looking at the pictures. But reading is too looking, at pictures and asking the right questions. And because most of our kids can tell how our story is going by looking at the pictures.
Yes.
So that helps.
Yes.
So when we talk about, we've talked about time, we talked about access, when we talk about genre, help us, Tammy, to really dissect just fluency. Like, what is that? Like, as we get into just the whole big, huge comprehension piece.
So fluency is one piece of reading. Reading is reading the words, accuracy and decoding. It's comprehending, understanding what we read. And it's fluency. And fluency is reading at an appropriate pace or rate, not too fast, not too slow, kind of that just right rate. The way we talk, or the rate at which we talk, is the rate at which we should read.
Okay.
That's one piece of fluency. Another piece is building expression in, reading like the character. If a child can read the words and read if it's dialogue, if it's in quotation marks, then they can read it the way the character's feeling. If the character's sad, reading it with a sad voice. If the character is mad, reading it with that angry voice. That builds fluency, but it also helps you to know that comprehension is taking place, because if they are able to read it the way the character would and demonstrate the character's feelings, then you know they're comprehending at that level. They're actually oftentimes inferring. Inferring means they use the text and use what they know to figure something out. And so sometimes the book doesn't say how the character's feeling, but they can figure it out by the actions and the events that are taking place. And then when they read it with that expression, then you can tell that they understood it.
So let's go back, because I even think, like, I went ahead of myself in knowing, like, I know we, sometimes are, so big into first, like, I just want you to read. I just want you to read, like, all of these words. I know you were telling me a little bit, before, just in my interview with you, about decoding, like, breaking it down before, like, the steps of reading. Tell us, a little bit about that.
So a big piece of reading, of course, is the ability to read the words.
Exactly.
That's accuracy. Decoding is figuring out words we don't know. There's breaking those words down and figuring out unknown words. A huge piece of reading, because if I can't say the words, then I'm not going to be able to read it at all. But that's not the only piece of reading. Oftentimes I would, as a lower grade teacher, I would hear from parents, I don't understand. My child can read. He reads to me every day, and he reads all the words of the page. And you're saying that he's not reading, and so there's this disconnect there.
Right.
And oftentimes that's because the parents are listening to reading, but if you go deeper and ask questions, and as parents, sometimes we just don't think about asking questions, or we don't know what to ask. So we think, well, they can read all the words. They must be able to read it. And they can read the words, but that's just one piece of that reading puzzle. And so we need students to be able to comprehend as well, to understand. Going back to that decoding piece, though, there are things you can do, things you can say to your child as they're reading.
I know sometimes, I don't know if you ever, I used to in my old teaching, it was bad teaching, but I'm better now because I get it. We would say, sound it out, and it's like, so tell us about how to fix that, because I know some of you may have your child where they're just reading things incorrectly and they're like, what's this word? Tell us about that.
And so sound it out is a very popular prompt. It's what we say a lot. But the truth is, when you ask your child to sound out a word, much of the time you're setting them up for an impossible task, because many words.
This is not her. She's like,
yeah. Many words in the English language cannot be sounded out. You can't decode them. So you want to teach kids to look for chunks in words that they know, parts of a word that they know, to think about words that word reminds them of. This word looks a lot like another word that I do know. So making connections between words. And then as they're reading, if they don't know a word, or if they read it incorrectly, rather than saying either A, sound it out, which some words can be sounded out, but many cannot, or just giving them the word. A lot of times that's what happens is, you don't know what to say, so you just tell them the word and they go on.
That doesn't really help, though, because they're not really practicing.
Instead, so I'm going to give you some things to say instead, right? So there are 3 different questions that you can ask them that will cover a multitude of errors in the reading.
Okay.
You can ask them, wait, did that make sense? You just read that way. Did that make sense? So you wanted to think about, in the context of the story, based on what I just read, did that word that I just read make sense with that? And ask them to stop and think about that. Or, does that sound right? That one goes really well when they leave the endings off of words, like they leave off the S or the ED, and they just say the root word. Does that sound right? Is that how we would say that if we were talking? Or a third one, does that look right, or does that match what we see on the page? You said, cat, but look at that word. That word is C-A-R. It ends with an R, not a T. So does cat match that? It does at the beginning, but if we look all the way through, it doesn't.
It's like a sentence makes me think of, like, the dog ran inside and they may not know what that is, and they say the dog ran inside the hat, just because it has an H, and they just say it so fast, impulsively, right? You're like, that's not a hat. But I love asking that first question. Does that make sense? Is that what we see? Take a look at the picture of the dog running inside a hat. No, I think it's important to catch it right there and help them.
And a lot of times, if you just give them those prompts, it gets them thinking, and then they'll get it.
sometimes you do have to give them a word. We don't want kids to work and work and work to the point of frustration. So after a few tries, if they can't get it, you can tell them and show them the sounds in the word. But encourage them to try before you just tell them the word.
What would you say, Dulce? I know, just even briefly speaking with you about, some of our parents are probably like, I don't even feel, confident saying certain words because I speak, a different language. How is that for you as, a mom? Like, what do you do when you get really stuck in those situations?
I send him to his father or to the tutor. So, example, at night he wants me to read to him, and he wants me to read him the Encyclopedia of Dinosaurs. Well, that's not going to happen, because I think in order, it's great to read to your child, and it's great when you're able to read clearly to your child, because obviously they're going to mimic what they're hearing. So if you're saying something wrong, they're gonna say it wrong, and then they come to school and it's like, well, why is it? Well, my mom says that. Well, it's wrong. Well, no, my mom's not wrong, and it can become an issue. So I try to avoid. I'm dyslexic, and English is my second language. So I want to pronounce everything in Spanish, or I won't come read to, like, at the library when you have the volunteers, because I'm afraid that I'm not going to be able to pronounce something, but
I'm glad that you said that. I'm pretty sure that's for a lot of people.
Especially I feel that I think I don't have an accent, but people say that I do. But I know that there's parents out there that their English is not as I don't know how to. I don't want to be mean and say their English isn't good. I don't know how to say that in a
maybe
nice
just
way,
not
no
as.
offense.
But yes, but maybe
You're
not as clear. Yes, it's fluent.
Clear as fluent. And so one of the things that I was thinking right now, and when we had our talk is, so like in my case, I get a book that I can read. That's what I do. Yes. I get a book that I can read that I know that he's going to enjoy as well. And that helps both of us. But a question that I do have for you is, so I have a friend, and she is from South America, and she has a very, very thick accent when she speaks English. And so it just got me wondering, how can a parent like her go upon something like this? Because obviously there's parents, there's so many different races here from different countries, and how will there's might be a mom that wants to read to the child, that wants to give them that, but just either doesn't speak English, or like I said, has that heavy accent that you're really hurting your child more than what you're helping him. So and if they can't afford to get a tutor or someone to come help them, like what can a parent like that do?
Well, I think that regardless of what accent you might have, or whether you're an English language learner, or it's your first language, or or if it's your first language but you're dyslexic, or you never, there are families whose parents had to go to work early and weren't able to graduate high school. Those are just the realities for many, many people. But I think that showing our students that we all do the best we can, and I think it is okay to still read to your child if you're your English isn't perfect, or you struggle over some words. I think that's okay. Maybe in addition to just going ahead and reading, because if they're speaking English in the home, she's speaking that way, just like she's reading that way, right? So he's already hearing that. So hearing reading is still good for him.
And I'm thinking also, what about both of them learning from each other?
I was thinking about that too.
So go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
another
go
thing
ahead.
is like, so my friend that I'm saying, she's from South America. They don't speak English in the house.
They speak Spanish.
And growing up, we didn't speak English in the household either. So would you recommend for them to read in Spanish or whatever language that
that's
they?
The other thing I was going to. Yeah, that's the other thing I was going to suggest is. There are still a lot of things that they can learn. He can learn if the child can read in Spanish. Then they can read in Spanish. They can read in English. If they can't, if the child can't read Spanish but understands Spanish, then the mother or the father could definitely still read books that are in Spanish, because oral comprehension, comprehending what they're hearing from a story, it works in both languages. So I think that would work. Also, there
listening books. I just was thinking, I'm like pushing it. I'm like, even for that, I think that's a very strong question, and I'm glad that we said that. Just finding books. I know that, online, audiobooks, going to the library and saying, do you have any that I perhaps can check out to listen together?
Both of
And there are websites that you can go to that are free, where they'll show the pictures in the book and someone's reading it out loud.
Montgomery County has
Montgomery
it.
County Library.
Yes, I was like, if you go online to their website, now you do have to have your library card.
Yes.
And you enter your library card. What I found is that they have audiobooks for y'all to listen together.
They do.
And so if you're growing as the reading family, learning English and learning being as a family and listening together and looking at, the books even while it's online, I think that's, really
It's beneficial
important.
for both. If she's still working on learning the English language, that can help her with that process while helping her child to grow his reading skills. Also, if there are older siblings in the home, reading with an older brother or sister could help as well. So it's definitely a challenge that many of our families face. And there's
I'm sure there must be volunteers.
I'm sure that there are.
Like college students that want to be a counselor or teacher or something like that maybe need hours for internship.
That'd be awesome.
Maybe that's how they can get some
some support in that area. Yeah,
and sometimes
absolutely.
the public library maybe has connections for that too. I honestly don't know, but it would be worth looking into. So there's no quick fix, perfect answer to that, but there are some viable options. That she could work toward. I think. So that's a great question.
Well, I'm picking on her, and I don't even know.
Yeah.
Her kids are very good readers. They're very, very good readers. But I just thought of her and...
But they would still have to... I'm glad that you asked, though, because they would still have to practice.
Families,
and there are other families where maybe their children are struggling a little bit to read, and so those may be some options for them.
Tell us, before we get into questions, last thing, just that final comprehension piece on, checking for understanding. Like, what is that? What does that look like? What are you asking? Because I know sometimes parents get stuck. Like, how do I know, if my kid really understood the book or not?
Right. So there, like I said, there are three parts to reading. There's the reading of the words.
Right.
There's the
coding.
Fluency, and then there's also comprehension. Comprehension is a huge piece because if students can read the words but aren't understanding what's happening in the book, or they're not gaining information, or they're not understanding the story, then it's kind of pointless, right? I mean, ultimately we read to understand. And so the first step is learning how to read words, but we have to pick up that comprehension piece. And so we need to ensure that our students are understanding what they read. And parents can partner in that. Parents, it's not expected that as a parent you would be teaching the things that the teacher in the classroom teaches, but there are ways that you can support that. As they're reading to you, if you're fixing dinner and they're reading at the kitchen table while you're cooking, every few pages, stop them and say, stop for a minute. Tell me what's happening so far in this story. Or if it's nonfiction, tell me some facts that you've learned about sharks so far. Or what's something that interested you. And have those little stopping times where you have conversation about what they're reading to make sure that they're really getting an understanding of the story or the nonfiction.
And I think when you say that, Tammy, just that intimacy, this is a great time for you to build an even stronger relationship with your kid and being able to just talk to them about interesting things or, about their homework, just that time alone with them. So I'm thinking if you, are cooking or whatever it is, because sometimes we're moving 1,000,000 miles per hour, right? But you have that time with each kid, whether you have one or whether you have three or however many, you have that time to just come in and just let me hear from you. Let's talk about it. And that's going to build their interest too. I feel like if they're reading, like your son, about dinosaurs and they're really interested, well, tell me about what's some facts. What did you like? What did you dislike? Ask them. What did you not like? What could have been different if you would have, written the book? How would you have ended? Those type of questions.
Yeah, and there are some, basic questions you can ask in fiction. Okay. You can ask, what's happening so far in the story?
Right.
Who are the characters? What have you learned about that character? What is he or she like? And a big one is, how do you know? So, if they tell you, well, she's...
It's is there a problem?
Right.
Is something wrong?
What is the problem? How do you know? Can you show me where in the book that happened?
I like that.
Or where in the book, what in the book let you know that that was, how the character feels, or that's what was going to happen next, something like that. In nonfiction, you can ask, what are some facts that you learned? What interested you? What did you read that you didn't know before? Because if they're reading, that's one of the big ways to catch a reader's excitement for reading, because a lot of our students, they don't like reading.
Yes.
And really, it's not that they don't like reading, they just haven't found the right book yet. And once you find the right book for a child, much of the time they'll take off.
Well, but what does that mean? And I just want to, clear the room and address the elephant. So if you haven't found that right book, Tammy, like, do you just, stop, like, just forget it, or do you keep trying, just keep exploring different types of books?
Just keep trying. And it's a process. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah, you were telling me about your daughter. She finally found what she loved.
My daughter struggled as a reader when she was younger. Did not have a good self-concept about herself as a reader. I read books to her. I read lots of books to her, but I would only read one book from a series or one book by an author. And eventually she found one and she said, "Mom, will you read the next one?" "No, I won't, but you can read it." And she picked it up and she read it. And then she read the next one and the next one. And before I knew it, like, she wouldn't put books down. We would go on vacation. Instead of looking at the scenery, she was looking at a book. So it just took finding the right book for her. And it took time. But just keep looking. Look for, nonfiction books. Look for fiction books. Oftentimes it's about finding the right series.
Yeah.
If you can hook a reader on a series, then they'll read more and more. And then they want to read another series that's like that series. And it just snowballs.
Go ahead.
It happened growing up, struggling with dyslexia. I remember I hated reading because of my problem. And I remember getting into junior high, I think it was my 7th grade year, I found a book that I liked. And it was R.L. Stein. I remember the author.
Yeah.
The R.L. Stein.
I think everyone.
And I read one book.
Yes, I was like, that was my thing too.
Well, I was a little bit older, so I knew about the Goosebumps too late. So R.L. Stein,
these were the higher ones.
The older ones.
Yeah.
And that's how I started reading. And I actually became, from 7th and 8th graders, I was, I think, the 3rd throughout the whole school to read the most books.
Wow.
Because I found that, and that is very true. When you find something that you really enjoy, it's gonna take off, because you're gonna want to know more. You're gonna want to read more. You're gonna want to learn more about the topic that you're interested in,
or read more adventures about that character. So absolutely, finding the right series or author, it can go a long way towards helping kids to realize that, I do like to read. I like to read this kind of book.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm loving the vibes here. We have learned a lot, and I know, parents, you are soaking this in. There were a couple of questions that we've already addressed in our video, but there were a couple that stood out that we haven't. We're going to try to answer as quickly as many as we can for time's sake. One thing is we have a parent just asking about what age do you think, Tammy, should she or he encourage some silent reading to themselves? Like, about what age do you?
Yeah. So silent reading is a developmental thing. And until children are developmentally ready to read silently, when we tell them or force them to read in their heads, what's happening is nothing. Because they can't do it. Very true. They just can't do it. They don't understand. And so, if you have it's not really a magic age so much as it's a developmental point in their growing as a reader. So it's typically around a level J, which is, all kids are different, but a J typically falls somewhere around middle of 2nd grade on average.
There you go, because I know you parents lost it. You were like, J, what?
Exactly.
J.
I have it, but I don't know what.
And I love it. She backdoor. I love Tammy. She's the expert. She's like, middle 2nd grade. Okay,
That's
we're
right.
good. Okay.
Middle of 2nd grade. Now, if you have a 2nd grader who is a really strong reader and reads above the average level, then they might be able to do it earlier. On the flip side, if your 2nd grader struggles a little bit with reading and isn't quite at that point yet, then they're not ready to do that yet. So, and that's okay, because it's a range. But typically around middle of 2nd grade. So by 3rd, 4th grade, most students can, unless they really have reading struggles. And the way to find out is to have them read silently and then ask them some of those questions and see if they can answer.
But make sure it's with a book that they know nothing about, because
Yes.
Roman says he reads in his head, and it's like, no.
No.
I know you're lying. And you can't ask him, well, what's that book about? When it's about dinosaurs, and I know he knows everything.
Because he's reading about something he has a lot of knowledge about.
You know, so it's like, I know
That's
you're not
good.
reading.
Look at mom's like, I know. That's
Yeah.
right. I caught it.
Yeah.
Well, another question that we have, as you know, Tammy, our district really favors, student choice. And sometimes I feel, maybe the lines get a little bit blurred on just what teachers are recommending sometimes, during the week. I know sometimes our students, as you've worked as a coach for years, have to get or recommended to get certain books because they're practicing things in class. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Sure.
Yeah.
So we do value choice, and we want students to choose the books that they read.
Right.
But in addition to choosing the genres that they want to read, sometimes they need to read a specific kind of genre. If I'm a 4th grade teacher and I'm teaching nonfiction in the classroom, and I've just done a lesson on nonfiction, text features or figuring out the main idea, then I need my students to be reading nonfiction books in order to do what I just taught. Because you can't do text features in a fiction book because they're not there. So they're oftentimes, and our instruction tends to be genre based. So we're either doing a unit on fiction, or we're doing a unit on nonfiction, or we're doing a unit on poetry. And so when we're in that, it changes, after a few weeks. And so when we're in that unit, we do need our kids to be reading that kind of book so that they can do the work that we're asking them to do. If I'm, as I said, if I'm asking for main idea and you're reading fiction, you can't do that. But that doesn't mean that that's the only kind of book you can read the whole time we're in the unit. Read this book for a little while, and then, read your book that you enjoy afterward, or
and I think
at another time of day.
Right. So it's almost sounding like, Tammy, that parents can still, on your time, get the big books of leisure, free choice that you want, but there may be something specific instructional-wise that the teacher's really trying to, have their student to master, because they want to make sure that they get it, especially when, of course, like we measure parents, the school system abstractly, like when we have like STAR tests and certain assessments that we have. If you can really quickly, we're almost out of time, tell us about just reading and writing homework, because sometimes I think those lines get blurred where some parents may think reading packets or practice STAR tests, like that's the way to go, that's the way you can master these questions, or when teachers just simply say, hey, I just need you to read. Why is, like, what is that, Tammy, if you can help us to understand that reading is just more so reading and not necessarily, doing paper tests. Right. I think that's our go-to. Like, my kids just got to pass the STAR or pass the reading test. I'm going to go print off A through Z. I'm going to look up STAR tests and practice questions when that doesn't really, help with comprehension.
So I'm a strong believer in that if a child can read book after book after book and read for long periods of time, if they can read on their own for 20, 30, 40 minutes, they can pass a test. There are absolutely certain test-taking strategies they need to know to learn to help them to be successful on that, and those are being taught in the classroom. But if you can just get your child reading every single day at home, that goes a very, very long way towards supporting them on that test. And sometimes we hear, if you value reading, or if you value
why are you not sending home
good grades or good scores, why aren't you sending homework home? And every teacher has a different at grade level they have different homework policies.
They do.
But I know that pretty much every grade level and every teacher within those grade levels asks students to read every night, and that is homework. Reading and talking about what they've read is
important.
Homework.
Reading and talking. Yes.
And if you monitor their reading by asking them those questions, then you know that it's actually, they really are doing it and not just going through the motions. And if they'll spend, good chunks of time in books and reading, they'll be able to read a test,
I think that's important for our, parents to know. I know that Roman is in 3rd grade now, but I know I'm glad that you ease that panic and anxiety. Right. So just plain reading. I know we have to sometimes have the paper, parents, but that's not, best practice. I think that it's important what you said, just continuing practicing reading. And if you need a little bit more as far as questions, after our show, Ms. Cornelson will be getting with us soon and some printed off questions for you to ask to explore. Our last question for the day, and we are done. Any tips of parents that have kids with special needs, like learning delays or, autistic? What are some suggestions to help them in those areas?
Patience.
There you go. All right.
Patience and love.
A lot of love, a lot of patience, and also knowing, I'm glad you asked that, because I was going to say from the last question, I said, if they read, they will be able to take the test. For many of our kids, that's true. Some of our students, though, they just have special needs and special circumstances, and so we just want to look for growth. We want to look to see that they're growing and improving and getting happy, better and better, and they're happy. Yeah. And so if you're seeing them reading and they're beginning to read for longer and longer periods of time, that's something to celebrate. We want to celebrate and be excited about that. As far as the different needs that they have and how to help them with reading, that is so specific to the individual student. Even within the range of autism, we have a number of students at Bradley that do have autism, and every child with autism is different.
Yeah, they are.
Oftentimes, students with autism are really, really good word readers, but their comprehension is a struggle. Not always. Sometimes, we have students that's the flip, because it truly is an individual thing. But and then students with dyslexia, oftentimes they struggle to read the words. They really often struggle with fluency. But sometimes they can still comprehend, but not always. So it's very, very specific to the individual. And so my recommendation would be try the things that we've talked about today, but in addition to that, contact your child's teacher.
I was about to say that.
Ask questions,
because and a lot of parents are, because they worry about language. They're scared that they don't have time. I think this is the language.
Yes.
That the teacher misinterprets something, the parent misinterprets something. And just don't be scared.
I think it's like the judgment. Just saying that, just not knowing what to do. You don't know what to do. And I think that's, this is such a beautiful moment. It's just the purpose of this show is we are the Bradley community. We're growing as a reading, family. And for those that are outside of our community, watching this, it's just so important for you to reach out to your teachers. Let them know, that you are needing some assistance and help.
Your friends, neighbors, family. If you're too embarrassed to come to the school, I'm sure there's a friend or family member that's willing to help you. A neighbor, like you said, older kids in the neighborhood that are willing to come and, read to your child if you just can't.
And I don't know of any teacher who would judge a parent or question a parent who was coming to them asking for help.
I know. They would be like, woo!
Teachers are thrilled when they hear you say, what can we do at home? Not that teachers expect you to do their job for them, but it truly is a partnership. And we partner together. As educators, we do what we can at school. And if you're able and willing to help at home, it's a win-win for everyone.
I even had a parent last note just come in and ask, can I, Ms. Wright, it was a math problem. Can I come in just one morning or during your conference time and you just show me how to do this so that I can start practicing? And I never, felt I love that because she really wanted to know and she really wanted to connect. And I think that it's important for us to ask. Well, ladies, we have spoken about so much. Thank you for being here and helping us. And thank you, my Bradley parent, for being here. We hope that we answered so many of your questions. Ms. Cornelson will be getting with us soon with some reading questions printed off. I will add a Google link for you to look at and start asking when you're at home. But guess what? If you're watching the video, you can go ahead and get started now. Just rewind and go back to those questions and start there. We look forward to seeing you soon, and we look forward to our next episode. Thank you. Bye. That was